you're working in the Azure space with some of the most highly performing partners, I'd say, in that space. What do you
Yeah.
think that those partners in particular are doing to make their Azure business really profitable, really interesting to customers?
I mean, the best ones I think are taking the advice I like to sort of give to a lot of partners, which one day is going to get me like fired probably.
Gonna
But
get cancelled.
yeah, I think the best way to sell Azure is to stop selling Azure and
Uh-huh.
focus on business outcomes. So if you can figure out like what is the customer problem, what's the pain that they're feeling, and then you can align the technology to solve that pain point, then immediately you're in a better place than trying to just sell the technology. And there are loads of customers out there who've got legacy workloads on-prem or in somebody else's data center. And for sure, like there's a lot to be done in migrating that. But I think the best partners take it to the next level, which is what do you do after that? How do you drive continued growth? That whole customer lifetime value kind of thing of, hey, like we moved that SQL server from A to B. Now let's talk about Fabric, for example, and Foundry and some of those more advanced workloads. How do we get you to be a frontier company? And a lot of that is sold by talking about the business impact that it has rather than the kind of technical coolness of the workload.
Yeah, I totally agree. I also think you can't have a conversation with a customer that's focused around Azure without building in some sort of security element, some sort of governance compliance, there's data involved. It naturally should lead on to conversations that span different workloads.
Yeah,
Um,
and like there's a ton of recurring revenue to be had, by the way, in that. Like
yeah.
that managed service space, I think, is where partners can. That's where they can unlock the best value as well. Is like attaching themselves, not just doing the transaction, saying like, "Hey, we're your CSP," but actually we've got your back from a security perspective, or we'll help manage the life cycle of those workloads. So I think you're right.
Yeah, and then it turns into this multi-year relationship rather than we went in and sold them Azure one time.
Yeah.
Definitely makes your customers stickier. Um, on that same vein, I guess, if you were to flip the coin, what do you think that partners are doing? I don't say doing wrong, but what are the common pitfalls and the mistakes that partners would make when it comes to that same topic?
Yeah, I mean, the one I've seen come up time and again when I speak to resellers and partners is um, only looking at the money they make on the back of the Azure consumption. So, what are the rebates? What are the incentives? What are the funding programs? And kind of stacking up the whole profitability story just on that. And that obviously there's money to be made. Like as a vendor, Microsoft puts a ton of money into the channel to incentivize partners to kind of go and drive the behaviors that it wants to see. So there is money to be made there, but it's not all the money. It's not all the money to be made. And actually, I think if you base your entire model just off that, guess what? Year over year, Microsoft will move its investments to drive the behaviors it wants,
Yeah.
and so you need to make sure that you're creating enough value and then capitalizing on that value on top, so that actually, if this year flavor of the month from Microsoft is we're going to go really hard on incentivizing Fabric, for example, but then next year that pivots to something else, you don't suddenly want to be saying, oh, we're not making any money anymore. You need to sort of be really clear with the whole stack, and then ideally treat any money you make on the back end, those rebates and other bits and pieces, almost as upside that you can use to
Hmm.
reinvest in growing into new areas. Like use that money to go tackle the next workload that your practice can't service today, or whatever you want to do with it, but use that to invest and get your profitability from the value you add on top.
Yeah, and I also think if you're a good partner and you're an ethical partner, actually sometimes those the Azure subscriptions that cost is sometimes going to be reduced. Like if you
Hmm.
do have the customer's best interest at heart, selling them more and more and more every year, it shouldn't be the goal. It should be giving them what's appropriate for them and their use case. So sometimes that revenue might decline for perfectly good reasons from a FinOps perspective. You don't want to be reliant on back end rebates and that kind of stuff if that is going to happen is a trend for a few of your customers. So it's a really good point.
Well, yeah, because what you don't want to do is create this weird world where you're disincentivizing people from having the trusted advisor conversation because they're
Exactly.
only motivated by the margin. And
Yeah.
and you do see that, and you see sort of like unnatural acts then as people try and bend themselves out of shape to unlock the right path to the most amount of money. When actually, if you just have like a a co-creation with the customer where you're like, hey, like, what are you trying to achieve? What matters to you? Maybe cost pressure is the like most upfront thing that you've got to tackle at the moment, but actually over the next, I don't know, 2, 3 horizons, whatever that looks like, you maybe got some like ERP system that's going to go end of life that you know you need to do something about kind of 18 months from now. Like the best partners create a plan to go
Hmm.
after that rather than just thinking, well, at the moment I can flog you a bunch of FinOps activity. And I think it's the best partners are the ones that are looking ahead rather
Yes,
than just what's today.
totally agree.
What about you? I mean, you speak to tons of partners every day as well, right? Like that's kind of the core. You reach a way crazy wide base of partners, so you must hear a lot. What do you think partners are getting wrong?
I think a really easy common mistake to make is not building Azure funding into their standard GTM, into their standard go-to-market practices. So there's a lot of Azure funding available to partners. And I know we totally understand how difficult it can be to understand it, to execute against it. Trust me, we're in that incentives guide all day, every day. There's a lot. But I think if you can understand the funding that applies to you, what you qualify to deliver, that can have a serious impact on the profitability of the way you take your solutions into market. So Azure Migrate and Modernize funding, we'll go through the incentives guide in a call we've got coming up actually, because there's just been a load of new Azure incentives and more money put into those pots. But if you could take those, make them really rinse and repeat, profile your customers in advance, you might have 10 to 15 that could qualify for this funding, be proactive, have that conversation with them. That could fund 100% of the pre-sales work that you would do for that customer. Just make your proposition much more enticing. And also using that funding, I think the customers really do, they trust partners who clearly have that relationship with Microsoft, know how to pull down the funding, know the sellers, know their industry. I think it helps build credibility. So I think the most common pitfall is sporadically going after funding. Make your offering qualify where you can, and it just makes the whole process slicker.
Yeah, and I think like what I'd love to see more of is partners that make offerings that are durable, like and that are good enough that even if there was no funding available, the customer would still want to pay for it.
Yep.
Because I think sometimes partners can be so reactive to the funding pots and they kind of create things that unlock the funding as it stands today. But of course, funding pots change, eligibility changes, and that kind of
Hmm.
thing. And like you can spend so much energy just trying to keep pace with that change. And actually, if you can create a bunch of workshops or deliverables or whatever it is that actually are durable, so they no matter what the Microsoft funding looks like you've still got a brochure of great value adding things for your customers, then like what a great message to be able to say, like, at the moment we can get vendor funding to offset the cost of this, but to have it be so valuable that even if the funding wasn't available, it would still be something that customers would want to pay for because they can
Yes.
see that it does something for them like that. And then you're not wasting time constantly reinventing and going through the cycle again and again and again, and building things that like you're once you've established an Azure practice, let's face it, like the core does not have to change very much. But if you keep chucking it out the window every time to keep tweaking it to unlock the next bit of funding, then you're wasting all of that effort from before. And I just think there's a
So
lot of
true.
repeatability that could be done.
Totally agree. I had an interesting comment from a partner last week who we went to meet with, who basically came to us and said, we don't want to make too many funding claims. We don't want Microsoft to think that we're rinsing the funding with regards to Azure. What's your opinion on that?
Rinse
Yeah,
it,
that's my
use it.
opinion.
Because listen, if you don't use it, someone else absolutely will. And it's a first come, first serve program, right? We don't carve out an amount per partner. Like
Mm,
if you can drive the pipeline and unlock more and more and more and more funding, like obviously we have we have the guide and that talks about, because sometimes within customers you want to run multiple projects, so sometimes there are limitations there that you've got to just keep in mind. But like, no, if you can go and drive enough growth and enough delivery, then do it. Don't be shy,
yeah,
because like I say, other partners are not shy. The only thing you've just got to keep in mind is you've got to drive success off the back of it. So what we don't want to see is partners rinsing this and then finding that they can't meet the success criteria, and then
yeah.
finding that they get sort of into hot water that way. We want to see return on investment from those funds. but absolutely, like there's like be shameless, like go for it, because
Yeah.
also that's how you build success. That's how you're going to unlock the specializations, or if you want to become an Azure expert or whatever, like you need to be driving the project work with customers, and so you absolutely should be, using all of the funding available. That's why it's
Yeah.
there.
That was my exact sentiment. I think the comment that I made to that partner, I don't think they realized that Microsoft could see the partner's program attach. That's a
Yeah,
metric that GPS, that the partner team in the UK actively can see and look at, and they want to reward partners who are good at attaching the programs. Like they want that to be high. Of course, there are rules. Misuse is not okay, and Microsoft will find you out. But if you're using it legitimately and have need, I totally agree. Go for it.
yeah, 100%. So, like, obviously we've covered a few different things there, but like, if you were speaking to a reseller today, like, what's the single best, or what's the first thing they could go and do off the back of this webinar, for example, that would have the biggest impact, like in the shortest amount of time? We've just launched our FY27 incentive guides, for example, and we're sort of like drip feeding the kind of partner priorities. Like, what would you say they should go do?
This is the perfect time to ask me this question. This is the one second best day of the year you could ask me this question. Yeah, 2nd of July, go and look at the incentives guide. It's big, it's hefty, co-pilot it, doesn't matter. Go and look at the incentives guide, look at what's changed last FY versus this FY. Note whether you're putting together a whole kind of debrief, and we've got our existing partners have been contacted already. We'll do some blogs. We're going to try and help the community understand it. But there are some serious updates, particularly in security, actually, in the security space. There's some real investment that's gone in, and also the biz apps community. So if I could encourage you to do one thing right now, it's get into Partner Center, or get us to get into Partner Center for you, understand those incentive changes. They're really impactful. And I think Microsoft's investment this year has been above and beyond. It's definitely been more than last FY. I think that signals real intent. Partner is their way to scale across customers. They want to be investing in partners, and they actively are. So that would be my one bit of advice.
Yeah, I agree. It is like the best time of year to be getting ahead of all of that. And like, I love the idea of use Copilot. Like, the guide is big. There's a lot of
Yep.
information in there, so absolutely, like, use the tools. Like, get Copilot across it, and industrialize your use of the incentive. Like, as we've talked about, like, figure out which ones matter, which ones are going to move the dial, and then go like bake it in so that it is just part of the process from like day one. I know Microsoft's fiscal year isn't the same as like every partner's, but like from our perspective, like day one, get it in, get it going, because if nothing else, that stuff compounds. Like,
Mm.
the best day to sell Azure was yesterday, then today, but like every day that you leave a project on the table uncompleted, you lose the impact that it can have, on your business, on and through the eyes of Microsoft. So like, get that stuff going today, and you'll reap the benefits for the rest of the year.
Totally agree. Thanks for coming on.
No, thanks for having me.